What is poppin' people? You got J Bear here, bringing you all Shuckle Premier League Week 5 results, Week 6 matchup overview for this episode of Draft Notes. As usual, thank you all for watching so much. We're a good bit of the way through the season, and it's really been, a great time for me watching all these games, giving you all my thoughts about it. And I ask that you all please subscribe. We've had a lot of new viewers to the channel, and so hopefully some of you guys want to stick around and watch some more Draft League content, whether that be this Draft Note series or my BBR run as well. I'm currently playing in a Draft League for those of you who maybe are only been tuning in for my SPL Draft Notes. It'd be awesome if you also wanted to check that out. But with all that being said, this is your spoiler warning to not get spoiled on the results of the SPL Week 5 games, which I will spoil in 3, 2, 1. Alright, and so here is the SPL Week 5 results. We had a fantastic Pick'ems week, going 9-1 if you factor in the game last week between Sierra and Aaron that was not played but is now played, and then we're still sitting at 49 games because the Moxie versus Sierra game has a slight extension to it. When I know the result of that, I will be able to reflect that into my Pick'em score, but because I do not yet know the result, we just had 9 games this week to recap. So after we saw Seabad and Mounte take their first win, first loss respectively last week, we were able to see them take a nice matchup here. Kind of Sun-ish on Seabad's side. Not really. He has like Fluttermane and Illumise to technically he has a prankster way to change the weather and such, but ultimately this was the Mounte show. He was able to, use a lot of his pieces. His team is really great because it doesn't necessarily need the rain to be up, and he demonstrated that quite well in this one, especially the Basque Legion. That mon has been so awesome this season. I think Last Respects is broken. I think Mounte is showing us why. And then obviously also just strong water type damage. Up next, we saw Tone versus Shroom Raver, and this one was big. I accurately predicted Shroom Raver would pick up his first win this week. Granted, it's his only second week playing with the team, but he got the vibes of it a little bit more this time around. And the big mon this week was Mamoswine being able to, Shroom had a great prep with the Iron Valiant with an air balloon, so that he could coaching the Mamoswine and then still be immune to the Earthquake, and Terra Blast flying Mamoswine for Ogerpon. It was a great Mamoswine game. I think Mamoswine's pretty cool, but that was a great game for Shroom. And then Tone still, he was able to execute his strategies. He was able to take one game. Gardevoir was really, really bulky, and that is really kind of how Tone was able to take that game. But Shroom played well in the other two. Up next, we see OG Albina versus Shuckle King, and this Owen really just demonstrated some very good prep here with the Terra Water Thunderous. That was ultimately one of the biggest things to show up. Shuckle had some interesting preparation, a couple of Terra Ice guys, which I thought was interesting, but looking at Owen's team, the matchup for Terra Ice did look pretty good, but Terra Water Thunderous kind of was able to shut that down, and the Absorb Bulb Colossal almost did something, but unfortunately Colossal's too little too weak for it to really work out, so ultimately Owen was able to prevail. Up next, we saw Joe UX9 versus Joey Pokeyame, and this was another interesting set. I think both coaches were able to execute very solidly in Game 1, Game 2. Game 1, where I believe that was Joey, Game 2 was Joe. Maybe I'm reversing the order, but it was the Sneasler versus Sneasel showdown, and ultimately Sneasler was able to Sneasler the Sneasel with Dire Claw, getting a big paralysis that pretty much iced the game for Joe. If not, I think Joey would have won. But that's the Dire Claw game. You live and you die by the Dire Claw. I think this is really the first major instance of Dire Claw hacks for Joe that I can really recall this season. So maybe he's not clicking it enough, or maybe he's just been unlucky, or maybe Dire Claw isn't all that broken. But this game definitely showed why it should be. So that took away Pokeame's undefeated spot. So spoilers, you guys can see the screen. There is no more undefeated teams, and there's no more winless teams other than Sierra, but Sierra is, a week behind, so maybe by the end of this week that'll be the case. But sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. This week we saw James versus Nexus, and that was the one where I flipped my pick'em on camera. You guys saw that, and ultimately that was a good call. James did end up winning on the back of his new free agent acquisition, Screamtail. Such an annoying Pokemon. We've seen it do super well lately with Wolfie using the Screamtail. I believe Screamtail was also on another Reg G team that's been around with a Terapagos, and we saw with the Lunala as well, I believe. So it's shown itself a great Pokemon in standard VGC, and then James kind of piloted that very well in this week, encoring, disabling, such an annoying toolkit while not really doing much damage. But that fits well on a lot of James's fatter side of the build, so I think, with those transactions, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Up next, we saw Amel versus Cloverbells, and this was a super close set. Obviously, it came down to the third game, but even in that third game, it was super close. Came down to Amel really having his Terra fighting Hoopa Unbound, being able to live the Brute Bonnet Sucker Punch. You had the Reflect up to help out. Hoopa's notoriously got a bad defense stat. That was all able to clutch up, and he was able to take home that game 3. But yeah, both of their offenses were able to click pretty well in the earlier games, which led it to be such a close set. Up next, we saw Datsa versus Viz. Viz was our other undefeated team this week, now defeated at the hands of Datsa. That's just, using his, I want to say, more unorthodox prep style, but he really was able to break out of his shell and take a little bit more risk, which was a very highlighted thing for him this season. Was starting off being afraid to miss Rock Slide. Now he was clicking Rock Slide with being paralyzed and being able to actually hit the Rock Slides. Hopefully that does a number for his confidence, but that was an incredible execution as he now moves to 4-1. So that's another team that you guys will be seeing in the playoffs. And speaking of 4-1, we see Mr. Aaron Cybertron Zhang coming off of another win, a big win streak, although this one I think he got pretty lucky, and Keeley won game 1 off of the back of Sash Quackleval. Aaron adapts, but still is fighting in an endgame with the Sash Quackleval and needs to get a double protect to win that game 2 endgame. And then game 3 does execute a lot better, but he was talking himself where, it was kind of questionable on how he played that week, but ultimately still able to come out on top, which is, sometimes Pokemon will do that for you. It's a give and get kind of game, so not too much to really say about that. And then our final played game of the week was Necra versus Liv. Necra did a great job game 1, and then Liv really rallied back and adapted in games 2 and game 3, especially Tornadus T. That mon showed why it's actually still good in doubles, even though, people are like, oh, Torn T, why not Torn I? But no, Liv showed a great usage of Torn T this week, so a real great mon that we kind of slept on. And then Moxie versus Sierra in that TBD category. But I have gone back above my intended, or my goal threshold for the pick'ems being, 66% win rate. So we are right about there, a little bit above it. So hopefully we can continue that streak in the coming games. And now, getting into our matchup section, the first one we have is Mr. Seabad going up against PokeMMD. And the first Pokemon that I want to shout out is Gyarados. Gyarados was a mid-season acquisition for this team, and I think it's been doing quite well these past few weeks, but especially this week. The Gyarados was, I think it looks really, really solid with Terra Flying. And then another cool thing I think it could do is actually run Mirror Herb, right? If you run Mirror Herb, then if you accidentally intimidate the Annihilate, then all of a sudden you're +2 attack as well, which, can lead to some very positive play patterns. You set up a Tailwind and you just attack, or you have the Dragon Dance fallback, you have Terra Blast Flying, potentially for Annihilate and Hydrapple, and Mana Fatal Chunk, and then Water. Water plus Flying hits this entire team, and there isn't really a good Terra type to get out of that weakness. And then obviously Flutter Mane also looks great Ghost and Fairy, always a great combination. The Furret can potentially follow me away. The Shadow Ball, like, just Dazzling Gleam looks very, very free. And you can even run, like, Booster Speed to get past Deoxys Speed. So there's plenty of different options, I think, on Seabad's side. And on Joey's side, I know there's a set that he's super excited about because he DM'd me about it. But I'm not going to spoil it here. But I will want to shout out this Hydrapple. The grass and dragon damage looks really, really solid this week, and I think a tech like Heavy Slam for Fluttermane could go absolutely insane on like an Assault Vested set, and like AV, Terra, like Fire, Terra Steel can work really, really well here, and then you just, go for like a big like Fickle Beam, Heavy Slam, and you're in a pretty good spot. You can have like Giga Drain for a little bit of recovery on your Assault Vest set, and then like you're golden. So I think that this Hydrapple can do plenty of work, and I do really like Pokemon's matchup, not just this Hydrapple, but some of the cool sets that I've seen, and also just Pokemon like just Screens plus Annihilate looks really, really solid. So hard for me to kind of pick against Joey here. Up next, we have Shuckle King going up against Numb Nexus. And this is one where I think the Talonflame is going to be one of Shuckle's most important pieces. As you guys can see, he did make a few transactions, dropping Zapdos for Latias, and I believe another cheaper piece to get the Iron Thorns on the team. I don't think Iron Thorns is going to do very much here, to be completely honest, but I think Talonflame's super nice because, right, it basically stops Lilligant from doing its thing. Just on matchup, you're kind of shut out of one of your modes, so it kind of forces Nexus to roll back into the Trick Room mode. That being said, Trick Room does look pretty strong here, so it will be maybe a potential challenge for Shuckle to try to, be anti-Trick Room. And the other Pokemon that I really wanted to shout out was Urshifu. I think especially if you can pressure that Lilligant to stay home. Close combat looks great for Porygon 2, Surging Strikes, if you can keep the sun off, looks really good, but because of that sun aspect, I didn't want to, get ahead of myself with that Urshifu Rapid Strike. And then Latias, I think the new acquisition is going to come here to play some ball. It can potentially be like a trick set. I think that would be really interesting for like Clefable or Porygon 2, having solid damage output as well into the Iron Hands and resisting a lot of the Trick Room offensive Pokemon. You just kind of have to worry about like Crabominable or like the fast mode Walking Wake. So I think Shuckle has a lot of interesting pieces here. And then on Nexus side, I think the Porygon 2 looks really solid. Outside of like Urshifu, it's kind of hard to break this Porygon. And you have like Follow Me for the fighting moves. You have Sun for the water moves. I think it's going to be pretty challenging to break this thing. Or if it runs like a Terra type of like Ghost or something, it's very challenging to break because Ghost, right? You have technically offensive like Ghost move with like the Sinistra, or with the you can have offensive Dark move with the Persian, but that doesn't really do much, especially if you're like EV'd well for it. I think this Porygon 2 could just kind of do a lot of sitting here, but I think that, that kind of does lend itself to be more of a slower strategy, and I tend to, side with more like faster, easier to execute game plans, which is why I am leaning towards Shuckle King in this matchup. Up next, we see Shroom Raver taking on Amel, and I think that this is going to be a bit of a challenging one to predict. I think this Hydreigon looks super good, though. If you look at just Dark move into Amel's team, it does look pretty good. I think Terra Fairy and Didi might be a bit telegraphed. I think that, Granbull's not the greatest Hydreigon resistance, but I think, you can possibly consider, like, Amel doesn't have, like, any strong, like, ground type, I guess, like, Sandy Shocks, but, like, leveraging the Levitate immunity doesn't necessarily, like, help you too much with this Hydreigon, but just, like, Dark move plus, like, Draco or something. You could even, like, Dragon Cheer with the Noivern and get, like, a bunch of critical hit Draco Meteors, or just focus energy yourself, but I think that's a very solid play pattern, and I think just, being able to either drop Dracos or like Snarl also looks really nice here, and then potentially having like a move for Okidoki, or you could even consider the niche Terra Psychic. I don't think you do, just because Hoopa Unbound is so scary, but it is a way to potentially threaten the Okidoki, which I think does look so good here, right? You have Guard Dog to slow down Incineroar intimidating you. There is no Stab Psychic on the team, so the real only stab options that you have to worry about is Mamoswine I guess Oranguru is stab psychic, but like it's not that strong, and like Hoopa can annoy it. So Oranguru, Mamoswine, and Noivern. But it does really, really well into this top 3 if you run like Safety Goggles, Guard Dog, the Incineroar, Primarina, Amoonguss Core kind of gets decimated along with that Hydreigon that is so threatening to Anil's team. And you also can look, and like the bottom 3 is also very threatened. The Duraludon, Iron Valiant, Stonejourner, and you can even tack on like Ice Punch for the Noivern. And Mamoswine's still threatened. It's a speed tie. You're both base 80. Who wants to invest more speed? I think Amol does want the bulk on the Okidogi. I think it does help a lot here. But looking at its matchup, it just looks really, really solid, and it forces a lot of prep that maybe can divert away from like Hoopa and like that type of mode. So I do predict that Amol will win this matchup. Up next, we see Mountay versus Viz. And I really, really like looking at Mountay's Overquill matchup in specific. I think like a Life Orb Swift Swim Overquill has great potential here, right? Because Gunk Shot plus Crunch really hits this entire team super hard. There is like a potential, like you could think about like Terra Steel on like Urshifu or something. That'll be a resist and kind of force it 50-50. But like Gunk Shot, Crunch, Gunk Shot, like it just looks like it lends itself very positively into this team. So I think that's a great offensive piece here. And I think, Mousehold also has some applications versus like Urshifu, Meowstic. It'll get around like Focus Sash on either of those Pokemon that typically like to run it. I think that's a great option. But I really just like, giving Swift Swim that's faster than either Booster Speed Iron Crown or the Dragon Pult, I think is a very, very viable and very, very strong option here for Mountay. On Viz's side, I really think the Meowstic's important, right? This thing can not only get rid of the weather with like Sunny Day, but can also be like your speed control with, Thunder Wave or potentially Trick Room. I don't necessarily know if Trick Room is the move here, but I think that could be an option. Or Viz could also look to take advantage of Mountay's Rain with the Araquanid, and just clicking a lot of buttons with that thing, like either Liquidation or Hydro Pump. And in that case, setting up screens for it or the Trick Room for it could be a very viable option. So I don't necessarily know how Viz is going to want to play this Meowstic, but I'm very, very confident that it will come to this game and it will do stuff. But even with that, like even if you take away the rain, look at this Overcool matchup. It looks great. Thundurus can always be the prankster Rain Dance too. So I think that I do like Mountay's matchup in this one. Up next, we see Tone versus Moxie, and Tone himself also made some great transactions here. He dropped the Keldeo, which is the main thing. I don't think he was using Keldeo too much this season. It was always something that I looked at on the stat sheet at least, and it wasn't necessarily filling the stat sheet. So I think this was a great pickup. He also picked up some fake out support in the Thwackey as well, which I think was another great pickup, and then changed out some other cheap Pokemon as well, but doesn't necessarily matter too much here. But I do think the addition of Mienshao is super nice here, right? I do think the Keldeo did also have a quite solid matchup here, perhaps even better than Mienshao, but I like being able to, it's a stab close combat for King Gambit, which is the main thing, stab close combat for Iron Bundle. I think that the Thwackey also has some great utility here, for Palafin and Iron Bundle, and then I think like the core of, along with the Ogerpon, can do great work here. So all in all, I think this Mienshao is not only a great just general acquisition, but also great here. And then you also have your Sand Core to pressure the Pachorun still, so I think that could be great. I am a bit worried if like Terra Dragon Pachorun or something like that comes, because if you look at the team, Gardevoir kind of struggles here, Mence kind of struggles here, so something like a Terra Dragon Pachorun looks like it could be very, very challenging to break. But I'm also going to give a shout out to the Arcanine here. Look, he's such a good boy, but I think, it slows down the Ogerpon step 1, slows down the Sand Core step 2, probably might need to Terra here if you're, because like that Sand Core does seem very threatening, but the Intimidate on this body seems really, really nice. So I think that is a great asset for Moxie, along with like the Pachorun. Really gonna make that thing near unkillable, and then with King Gambit as well to deter like Salamence, or make it so that it can't be intimidated, but like also the hail support with like the Iron Bundle to deter Mence. I think that is a great move. And you can always make your Abomasnow slower than Tyranitar unless it's like an Iron Ball T-Tar, just because T-Tar has the natural 1-point advantage on Abomasnow. Normally a great thing, but here being able to guarantee to get your weather active if like it's a lead matchup, seems super important here. So overall, I do like the matchup for Tone just a little bit more, but I think that Moxie also has incredible, like, scary threats. So up next, we see Owen going up against Keely. And I feel like I pointed those out before, but in case I haven't yet, look at Keely's ice resists real quick. They aren't great. Yes, you do technically have Quackable to wall both stabs, but Quackable in the face of Ogerpon, Thundurus, Dragonite, Azumarill, kind of a tough sell, at least to me. And then, like, you have other resistances in, like, the Arcanine and the Typhlosion, but, like, those will get crunched. So I really do like that what this Chien-Pao can do. And then Ice Shard's also really threatening outside of, like, you know, Serena does block that priority, so that's something you have to worry about. But Serena also has to just worry about soaking up, like, an Ice Spinner. I think, like, Yachi Berry or a Terra Serena is very important here. But I think this Chien-Pao just looks so incredible. And it also does some great work for his partners, namely the Azumarill. I think that looks really solid here, especially once you remove that Serena. Then Chien-Pao plus Azumarill kind of damn near auto wins. And then on Keely's side, I really like Baxcalibur. I think it does probably need to Terra here, but like a Terra Steel Baxcalibur looks great. You can run like a loaded dice set. I think that looks really solid here. It naturally gets Thunderfang for the Azu, which is, you know, a pretty solid tech piece here. You could go like Scale Shot, Icicle Spear, Thunderfang, Protect. I think that's a pretty good set here. And especially if you can utilize Chien-Pao's Sword of Ruin to pick off its partners, I think that's something that can be super threatening here. So I do like this Baxcalibur, and I like this Serena, but I think that Monty is also quite pressured. So I'm not quite sure if she'll be able to, you know, hold on to the Terras at the right time, because they both kind of do seem a bit Terra intensive. So I am picking Owen to win just because of that Terra fact. Up next, we see Joe versus Liv, and this is a pretty solid matchup, I think, for Joe with this Gouging Fire, especially. You know, like something like the Alola Ninetales might be a bit annoying, but you run like Booster Speed Howl and you're doing great, or you just run Dragon Dance with support from your Fake Out guys, and you know, there's only one Covert Cloak on the team, so I think that can be really solid here as well. The Sneasler looks pretty solid outside of like Garchomp. You could even consider running like a Terra Ice Sneasler with Terra Blast to pick that thing off, because that's also the main threat to your Gouging Fire, so I think just, you know, doing that can be warranted. And then like potentially like a loaded dice Scale Shot set could be good. Heat Crash looks very free into a lot of the team. Maybe like Volcanion can take hits, but between like this entire team, Raikou can pressure it. This is a funny matchup because it's Raikou versus Raging Bolt, right? But I don't necessarily know if Raikou will show its face. It looks pretty decent, but I think that this Gouging Fire just looks so strong. I think that Liv has a couple of different options into this team, though. I think one of them being a Tornadus with like Taunt. I think that the Alola Ninetales with Veil can be useful here. But then also I just like Tornadus' offensive matchup here quite a lot. Bleak Wind Storm looks like a fantastic click here. Icy Wind looks nice as well. You just kind of have to be aware of Raikou. But Raikou kind of sucks as a Pokemon. It does not win games from what I've seen. So I think that this Tornty you can get away with a lot. So I just think like a Bleak Wind, Taunt, Protect, Tailwind looks really solid here. You're basically doing your Torn Eye impression, but also just kind of, you know, being a little bit faster and doing you can potentially do like regen stuff, but I think, you know, into like a team that is cycling as much like Fake Out as Joe's does, I think that is probably a worthwhile thing, and having that regen can help out a lot. But still, I really do like a lot of what Joe has to offer here, so I will be picking Joe in this matchup. Up next, we see James versus Necra, and I am going to highlight one of James's new pickups, that being the Scream Tail. Looking at it, I think it does deter a lot of what Necra may want to do. The booster speed, Scream Tail being able to just, you know, be faster and get off Encores, I think on like Volcarona, making use of that Volcarona can't set up. Encoring potentially the Ogerpon into like Follow Me. Also like Encoring Protect is super solid here. And I think like a slower opening game with like the Glamora, there's no natural grounded poison here, which means that there is no way to naturally soak up the T-spikes. So I think like spreading that toxic or just regular poison damage is super nice here. And then I think like Ting Lu also great. And then also the Galarian Zapdos looks fantastic here, right? It's definitely your best way through the Hisui and Gudra, but also great for like Volcarona, Cornerstone Ogerpon, and other stuff like that. No real Intimidate to make use of the Defiant, but still a very solid pick here. And then on Necro side, I really do like this Volcarona. I think if there is a way through this team, it is going to have to be with the Volcarona. I think something like Mental Herb may be the best way around it. You also have to contend with, Glamora, so potentially like a Terra set you probably have to do. Terra Steel forces a 50-50 with the Galarian Zapdos every turn. You also have to, keep in mind Fletchinder can just Gale Wings flying move you, so you also have to be wary of that. But the Ogerpon support can also be quite helpful here for this Volcarona. If Necro were to win this game, I think it's through some combination of Volcarona setting up, Ogerpon helping it out, potentially Klefki with screens, or like a bulky Gudra or Suicune out stalling this. But I think just because of the stats, it kind of, falls onto the Gudra as doing that job. So ultimately, I think this one is kind of hard for Necro, so I do pick James to win this one. But I could see Necro, being able to do it. She has the fighting types to get through the Tinglu. She has, a bunch of decent options. It's just, I think that James does his thing a little bit more consistently. Up next, we see Cloverbells versus Cybertron. And on Clover's side, I do want to highlight this for a draft. I think Trick Room's going to be the name of the game. I think he who controls the Trick Room can really control this game. And it's not just going to be, get the Trick Room up and go. It's going to be, do I want the Trick Room up or not? Right? The Glastrier has some interesting applications because it is the slowest thing on the team. And on both sides of the matchup, I think Glastrier is definitely the slowest thing. So is Clover going to want to put up the Trick Room here or not? That's the question. I think, Glastrier does have a solid offensive matchup. You have, like, Tauros to contend with, but you got, like, your Rotom Wash. I think that this Water Tauros does look pretty threatening, though. Not going to be the one that I shout out here, but the Water Tauros does definitely look quite threatening here. And then we also have, to contend with, like, Blood Moon Ursaluna. Looks really, really solid here. The normal Hisui and Ursaluna does underspeed Blood Moon, so that's something to keep in mind, right? Is that you have to deal with that. But also on Clover's side, it's important to note he cannot be like faked out by the Grimmsnarl. Probably pushes the Grimmsnarl into a different role where it won't have fake out at least. But also, he can't be like thunder waved and such. Can't be like taunted by the Prankster Grimmsnarl. So I think like screens and then like attacks could be a very viable option from that thing. But looking at Cybertron's side, I think this Enamorus looks fantastic, right? If you look at Clover's side, there's one Fairy Resist, it's Typhlosion. The best way is through Rotom and Frostlass. Once you tear it to just pure Fairy, I think looks really, really solid here. There's no Steel or Poison type on the team, so it's like Heavy Slam Glastrier or just like, the natural power of Blood Moon or Saluna clicking Blood Moon. But I think like a Light Screen and a Reflect can definitely help that out, because on Clover's side, he's got a few Brick Breaks, no real Psychic Fangs, so I think that the screens, if they come, could be very, very challenging to deal with. That's why I do pick Cybertron to win this one. I think, Crest is also a bit more of a sturdy Trick Room setter compared to the first draft, but also like a bit more sturdy anti-Trick Room. Like you can be the imprisoned Trick Room right here, but then you have to worry if Clover wants to go even faster than you. So it's got a very interesting matchup to it. It's hard to predict, but I think that Cybertron has a slight advantage here. And then the final matchup of the week, we see Dazzle +1 going up against Sierra Dawn. And on that side, I really think that this Regidrago looks fantastic. There's only a few Regidrago resists. It's Dash-Spun and Corviknight. And the Corviknight, I think, has, it is potentially very annoying to deal with between, like, Magmortar is the real only stab option to deal with it. But Whimsicott, encoring it can get super annoying for it. So I think, like, that is definitely workable. And I think, like, Physical may even be better than Special here just because, like, the Ogerpon Wellspring. But this is also definitely, like, a late-game Pokemon. I don't think it really does much early. It's more so designed, in my mind, to come out in the later game and do a lot of damage. With, like, potentially, like, a Terra Steel set so that it's challenging to KO once you're, able to handle the Chi-Yu. And then on Sierra's side, I think the Ogerpon's really important here. You have Ivy Cudgel, which kind of smokes outside of the Gastrodon, and then Gastrodon obviously is like Corn Leeched. You could potentially be in a scenario where like Terra Poison Gastrodon comes in and walls, but or like Terra Fire Gastrodon actually seems really, really heat. Now that I look at it, I think that Pokemon can do some serious work, because right, you have the Storm Drain to be immune to the Water Stab, and then the Fire is immune to the Grass. You resist the Chi-Yu moves, while not really adding any major weaknesses. Like Donphan is the main one. There's Donphan, Lycanroc Dusk, or Lycanroc, not Dusk, Lycanroc Midnight. Like those aren't really like the most threatening Pokemon, and you also just threaten to kill them with Muddy Water. So I think that could be a potential threat here, and I do favor that. So just because I think his tools are a little bit better, despite maybe struggling a little bit with Corviknight. I think he handles the offense well enough where it should work out well for him. So yeah, those are my pick'ems for this week of the SPL. Let me know if you disagree or agree with me. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week. Bye. Peace.